Hi, everyone. We are back again with another Risk Insurance Dialogues interview. Today we have Chris Bouley. And thank you so much, Chris, for being here today.
It's my pleasure.
And before we get started with asking Chris some questions, just as a disclaimer, Chris is here as a private citizen and not on behalf of any organization. So, Chris, can you just kind of get us started with sharing a little bit about your own career journey and kind of what's led you to where you are today?
Sure. I'm a managing director for Wells Fargo Advisors right here in Providence, Rhode Island. Been doing in that capacity for about 25 years, but I've really been in finance my entire adult life. Started with a small bank in Providence as an intern at Bryant University, stayed through the corporate life, and then eventually saw that travel for and moving away from New England was going to be required for my next position in my company. So talked to some folks and ended up getting to the brokerage business. I've been doing this since June of 2000 right now, so 25 years.
Wow, yeah, so you've been doing this a while, so you're seasoned. I'm sure you kind of know your way around the block at this point. And with regards to, you've been through these different phases in your career, how would you say, for people coming into or maybe starting out on the front end of getting into this career and hopefully becoming a longer lasting thing, how would you recommend that these new professionals kind of take ownership of their career, a thing that you did when you were starting out or progressing through your career that really helped you?
Well, it's been explained to me that when you're in the finance career, it's like a rocket ship leaving Cape Canaveral. All that energy to get into space, it's 90% there. And then all of a sudden you can kind of not coast, but doesn't require as much energy. So you have to be prepared to work very, very hard the first 3 or 4 years. You've got to make sure that you make as many connections as you can. Don't worry about that connection that might take 10 years from now, because every time you make a connection, make a touch, there's always that opportunity. So it's not for somebody who's not who's shy. You want to get out there and meet people. There are organizations to belong to, and then you have to have a philosophy about your business. Mine was driven early on. My father made himself a millionaire with an eighth grade education. And when it came to insurance, he said, never insure things that you can afford to replace. So that's my philosophy working with clients for insurance, which is part of the investment process, is making sure that we don't waste money becoming insurance poor, that we only insure things that we can't replace: our income, our home, some of our assets, our retirement income. Those are ways to look at it. And frankly, it sounds a little coy, but people don't care what you know until they know you care. So you have to have that philosophy of putting the client first. Everything else is going to come your way. And a lot of people don't do that. So that's the way to differentiate yourself is, what can I do for my clients? How can I show them that I value every aspect of a relationship? I am fortunate. I'm a big golfer, and a lot of my clients golf, and I get to spend opportunity with them. These are people I'd be playing golf with, whether it was business or not. But you have to have an insurance philosophy, an investment philosophy, and just put people first, and everything else is going to work out tremendously.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a big topic that we talk about here a lot is, those interpersonal connections because as you navigate through your career and get higher up and climb the ladder, it becomes more about you as a person as well because comes a point where everyone has a lot of knowledge. So you have to figure out how to differentiate yourself as a person and as a human. So that's a great point that you made as well.
Yeah, you have to be eventually consciously competent, where you know what you're doing, and how do you apply that skill. You're adding value to certain folks, and it's a learning experience. You're not going to have it. I have 25 years. I still make mistakes. I remember recently I was working with an insurance executive on his retirement plan, and I assumed he knew a lot of the terminology, and I was taken back a little bit. And I said, I've got to recalibrate here. The person didn't understand the insurance industry as well as I thought in terms of terminology. So I had to go back to square one. And fortunately, I was able to save that relationship and bring them on as a client. But there's always recalibrating and meeting people where they are. And those assumptions can get you in trouble.
Yes, definitely. Regarding, being involved in such a large organization, is there maybe a particular way, because there's differences between working for a smaller company and then working for a large organization with multiple wings and branches and all these things. Is there a certain way that you have to carefully navigate those larger companies as opposed to maybe working for a smaller like local bank or something like that?
That's a terrific question. So when I started in my career, first and foremost, my father was a heating contractor, and when there were 6 children, we all worked into the family or business. And he realized that that wasn't my thing. He says, "Go to Bryant, become an accountant." That's what I did. And in that transition at Bryant, I went and worked for a small local bank, and I was making $4.25 an hour, and I was spending more in gas to get to that place than I was actually making in money. But they had me do everything: residual collections, general collections, accounting, tax preparation. I did a little bit of everything. So when I needed to move on because they wasn't a place for me to grow and reach my potential, I moved to Textron Financial, and they did everything the same, except it was more compartmentalized. But I knew every aspect because I did it on a small scale. In a bigger organization, you just have more bureaucracy that you work with. There are more things that you have to kind of understand, the give and the take. And then you got to figure out where you can make a difference. When you're young, you want to kind of go along and make sure that you're matching at least the minimum requirements of the job. And then for me at Textron, they just let me go wild with fixing things and changing processes. I just ran them by my boss, and they talk about it and they're prioritizing. And that was incredibly, incredibly rewarding. Then when I moved to the brokerage business, it's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. There's a built-in model of success that you want to embrace and appreciate, because if you work in that environment and really recognize the power of that, you still limit the money that you can make. And the closer, what I would say is not to jump ahead, but the closer you are to the client, the more revenue you bring in, the more protected you are, the more value you are, and you can make career plans based on that. Because right now I have a book of business that's really, those are my clients. And the closer you are to the client, the more protected you are.
Yeah, that's a great point also. You want that's a great way to kind of show your value to the company that you work for, right? Is if you know that you have these clients that truly appreciate you and you have that close connection with, then you have something that's invaluable to the company because they want to keep you because you have this great book of business. So that's another great point as well.
And you're always measurable. So at a major brokerage, you get about half of what you bring in. So you're very cognizant of your value to the firm. The firm is very cognizant. You run a clean business. You do put the client first, and you're gonna have 99.9% success.
Definitely. And now kind of taking a backtrack, so kind of like a sidestep of what we were talking about, but for professionals coming in or maybe in our fields, you have to interview a lot, right? You're constantly communicating with people, trying to get new opportunities, new jobs. Um, as someone who's been in your field a while, is there something maybe that you see like a little common faux pas or something that happens constantly in these interviews or just in the application process that you see a lot of like, oh, that is something that is easily fixable that you just see happening time and time again?
Don't take an interview with a company if you're not going to take a couple of hours to do your research about that. And with the internet, it's so much easier. You can go to investor relations. You can look at the balance sheet. You can talk to people if you've got connections. If you don't have connections, just do a lot of research. If the company is not worth doing that research, it's not worth interviewing for. And I think you really want to understand the process. And it's just 85 to 90% of all of this is just human connections and human relations. All of these big firms have tremendous capacity to support clients. Can talk about the bigger firms, but everyone knows who they are. And now it's a matter of taking the skill set that you have, matching it with the resources you have, and delivering value to the client. And you want to think about that constantly. And it's an incredible avenue for success when you're bringing value to the client. I hope that answered the question. But in terms of you've got to make sure that it's not about what you can get from the organization, what you can give to them. And the first part of that is doing the research on the firm, because you want to make sure that this is where you want to be. You don't want to have a job change every year and now you have a resume that's tainted, and people will not
Yeah.
give you the benefit of the doubt. A person graduating from college right now might have 7 or 8 job changes in their career, and that's acceptable. But you don't want to have them all before you're 30 and show an instability that's going to put you at the bottom of the pile of resumes.
Yeah, definitely. I think sometimes people are eager to move, every year, and you kind of you can't think about it that way as just like job hopping, because that's also, I feel like, a huge red flag for someone, as well. Um
Well, I said I was super fortunate in the last 5 years. Um, I think I've put everything we're talking about today to the best of my abilities, my skill set. But I've gone from a vice president to a first vice president to a senior vice president to a managing director. Most of those in the same firm, but they're two different firms. So that shows a path. So you'd like to do that in the same firm until you maybe need to move on, because sometimes you do need to move on. But if you can show a pattern of success, I think that separates you.
Yeah. And as a final question, just to kind of wrap things up here, is there maybe an overall piece of advice or something that, if you could go back, you would tell your like newer professional self, or that you would tell someone coming into whatever field in corporate America that someone is coming into now?
Yeah, when I was I think I was 28 years old. My boss had given me a performance review, and he said, "You've done a great job, but you do not stop and smell the roses. You step on the roses." So my intensity was probably getting in the way. So I was getting a lot done, but I needed to be more resourceful with the human connections to get people to buy on to what I'm looking to do. I felt at times I knew more in terms of what needed to be done, and I need to kind of slow down and make sure I understood all of the interactions and understand the room, and be a little bit more like a duck. You can paddle like hell underneath, a little bit, be a little smoother. And then finally, I would steal this from Jamie Dimon, is at some point it's going to end. Make sure you're enjoying yourself. I set goals for myself that are higher than I think I can achieve, but I'm not going to beat myself up if I don't get them. You constantly want to set those goals, but you got to make sure that it doesn't give you imposter syndrome if you don't get them. Enjoy the ride up. You're in your 20s and 30s. You're going to have responsibilities. Don't compare yourself to anybody else. Just do the best you can and have fun with it. And I look back, I've been doing this since I was 19 years old, and I can say I really enjoyed 98% of it.
Great to hear. It's so nice that you have such a positive outlook on your career and what you've done and what you've accomplished. And I think that's something that everyone should try and have with their career is, you want to look back and be proud of everything that you did and say that you had a great time doing it and all of these things. So that's definitely wise words.
Well, thank
And
you. Anything else?
I think that was the last question. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. This has been so great to get such a different outlook and answer some of these questions that we see up a lot. So I really appreciate your time.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you.